for your real life. CountryMax.
My name is Paul Guglielmo. Thank you for coming to CountryMax for this canning class. This is going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited. We're going to get super nerdy and geeky about the science of canning, and it's great. So, for the purposes of the camera turning on, time, temperature, and pH. Those are our three big things. So let's talk about time. Actually, let's start with temperature. Temperature. 195 degrees is going to be your safe temperature. You want that for about 6 minutes. When I do tomatoes at home, I just go to a boil. I saw a scheduled process out of the University of Tennessee recently that was saying if you go to 205 or 210, you need more like 45 seconds or even 2 minutes of time at boiling to be sure that you've kind of killed off all bacteria. That's what we're doing really, is we're killing bacteria by going to that temperature. Cornell University, which is where I received my thermal processing degree. Again, Mom, if you're watching, that's Cornell University, where I received a degree. Not a real degree, I should say. I didn't actually go to Cornell. It was one of those like week-long classes where you go, but still, I have a thing that says Cornell and my name on it, and like that just counts. I don't care what anyone says. So anyway, Cornell is usually the ones who tell us, especially on tomato-based products, 195, 6 minutes. That's where that comes from, Cornell University. So temperature, obviously very important. The amount of time you're at that temperature. The third element is the pH, the acidity that we're actually, the actual environment inside of that jar. Under 4.2. Just to be a little extra confusing, acidity is an inverse scale. So the lower the number, the more acidic, just for fun. They were like, the scientists one day were like, let's do this. Let's make it more confusing. Let's make it the opposite of what it actually is. But anyway, lower the pH, the more acidic the product actually is. We do some stuff at our cannery that has very, very low pH. We do like some hot sauces, vinegar-based things, like red hot sauce that you might get at like Chipotle or something. That stuff is tons of vinegar in there. That stuff would like survive anything. The pH on some of that stuff, I actually looked at one today, 2.92 pH. And I know that might not mean a lot to you if you don't know your pHs, but that basically means like you don't have to almost do anything to it. It's just gonna preserve. It's that acidic. Tomatoes kind of fall into a weird land though, because anything above 4.6 suddenly is like dangerous. 4.6 or above can really, the risk at 4.6 is, I don't even know the real name of it, but something botulinum, right? Botulism, food poisoning, basically. Yeah, botulism. That's your biggest fear, yes. So this is gonna be your secret to that, pH meter. 4.6 or above is where that can start to happen. Doesn't mean it will happen at 4.6, it just means that it could. And the higher you get, the more the likelihood that it could happen. So where we run into that is because I'll get asked this, I'm sure, by the end of the class, so I'll jump right to it. We're just canning tomatoes today. It's gonna be tomato, basil, parsley, a little bit of salt. Many people want a bottle sauce. You wanna make your whole pot of sauce exactly. You make onion, garlic, maybe a little Parmesan cheese, red wine. You use red wine in your sauce? A little red wine? Okay. I don't put it in my sauce. I put it in the body is what I do. I use it on Sunday. People will want to bottle their sauce, and that's fine. But when I start to say things like onions, Parmesan cheese, people sometimes they'll want to do like a vodka sauce. They'll put cream in it or something like that. Great, awesome, I'm sure it's delicious, but it's gonna drive that pH higher and higher and higher. And so in that case, if you don't do something to acidify it, like our citric acid that we have here, which you can buy at CountryMax, you will actually be at great risk for some sort of bacteria and of course our worst fear of botulism. So, I'm gonna show you how to make sure that doesn't happen. Okay, time, temperature, pH, those are the three things. We call them critical factors. The actual art of like, what are we making here? It's hard to call this a recipe. It's funny, I do cooking classes all the time in Canandaigua at New York Kitchen where we make sauce and we make chicken parm and meatballs and all that. Today we're just canning. So the actual recipe of what we're making today is nothing. I mean, this is tomato. That's all that's in there right now is tomato on a pretty high heat. These were full tomatoes about an hour ago. You can see what they've gotten down to. I'm gonna take some, this is the best time of year for canning too, especially tomatoes, because we're gonna take some basil fresh out of the garden. Oh, you can't beat it. The smell when this basil hits this tomato, please. Oh my goodness. I feel like it deserves a moment of silence. It's so good. So we're gonna take as much of this basil off of here as we want. Generally, it's an eyeball thing. There's no real recipe where this goes, but I get pretty generous with it. So we're gonna take that and that and that. And we got a bunch of basil. Then we have our parsley. We like flat Italian parsley, but if we can't get that, this will do. This is some good parsley, so we'll just break off some of that. And usually I add this stuff when I get to about the point. I don't know if you could see the consistency when I pulled up the spoon there, but usually I'm looking for about this consistency. We're not ready to can yet, but we're also not looking at giant chunks of tomato anymore. This is really turned into a, you know, a little bit more of a sauce-like consistency, or like a diced tomato consistency. Then the last thing we're gonna add is we're gonna add some salt. This is actually canning salt. So this is a little bit different than regular salt at home. And I'm gonna get pretty aggressive with my salt. That's right. We didn't say we're doing low sodium today. So I'm just gonna get all that mixed in there, and I want that to go a little while longer once I've done that.
What's the difference between kosher salt and canning salt?
The rabbi blessed the kosher salt. No, so the truth is, so canning salt is not, I think it's iodized, right? Okay. Like the table salt is iodized, and that's a caking agent. So basically what that does is creates like a cloudiness, a different color. The actual honest to God truth is, you should buy the canning salt from CountryMax. That's the honest to God truth. The last ingredient in here, which we're probably not gonna need, but you need to know about, is something called citric acid. Really important in that situation where we add cheese and, you know, onions and things like that. In this situation, tomatoes are so naturally acidic already, it's probably not gonna be necessary. But I'm gonna show you how to find out if it is gonna be necessary. pH meter. This is like, I think I got this on Amazon for like 70 bucks a couple of years ago. Now with inflation, I'm sure it's 100 bucks, but this is a simple little pH meter. This is not as expensive as you might think it would be. You could buy one of these, keep it at home, and always, like for you, for your worst fears, you'd be like, I can always check and I can know for sure. Truth be told, my grandpa, Pete Guglielmo, lived to be 91. I don't think he could have told you what pH was. He didn't even know, because this is all he canned was tomatoes, and tomatoes are generally safe. So this is a buffer. This one is, I believe, 4.01. Yep, 4.01. The next one is going to be 7.0. If you buy a little pH meter like this, it'll come with little samples of these things. It'll all be in the little package, and it'll be like, again, 100 bucks for the whole thing. So I'm going to just get a couple of little bottles of this going. And then I'm going to calibrate my pH meter. I told you we were going to get nerdy. This is great. I'm having fun. I don't know about you. Okay, so little button on here that says calibrate. And all we're doing when we're calibrating a piece of equipment like this is we're just putting it in here and telling it this is 7.0. That's all we're doing. We're just saying, hey, this is 7.0. You should know, since you're in charge of now telling us if our thing is safe. See, it's saying 681, 686, 69, 692, 694, 96, 98, 70, creeping up, 01, 02, 03, looks like that's probably gonna be where we're gonna land. So 7.03, and we'll lock it in right there. 7.03 is really good. Again, for commercial canning, anything 0.04 on either side, we would consider to be acceptable. You know, an inspector, an auditor would consider to be acceptable, so we'll run with that all day. We're gonna do one more, it's a 2-point calibration. So now we're gonna do the 4.0. It's the exact same thing. We're just telling this thing, getting it a little bit more accurate and telling it where we want it to be. So it's coming down, but not as far down as we want. It's only about 4.2 right now, so it does need calibrated. That's good. Good we're doing it. So I'm going to punch that in at 4.16, since that's kind of outside of our acceptable range. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to stick this back down in here without calibrating, but I just want to see if that worked, and it did. So it says 3.98. So now it knows that's a 4.0, that's a 7.0. We're ready to rock. So once I have those two things done, the last step is I'm going to take out a little sample of my stuff and just enough where I can dip my meter down in there. Should be about right. And I'm just going to measure this. And what I'm looking for is that magic number. Who remembers the magic number? I heard you say it. You said it, 4.2? You had a jar of sauce. There you go. There you go. You didn't have to run up. I'll throw them. I don't mind. It's fine. I'm being told from the back I'm not allowed to throw them. Apparently there was an incident. Okay. You're welcome. All right, so I've got my pH meter in here, and now I'm swirling. It's reading. It's coming in 399, 40, 399, 40, 40, 40. Solid, 4.02. Oh yeah, baby. We're good to go. Okay, so what does that mean, 4.02? That means we're good. The acidity, the actual environment inside of there is acidic enough that we do not need to add citric acid. What would happen if that had come back and it had said something like 4.9, for example, we would add just a tiny bit, teaspoon at a time, mix it in. You'll do it again, it'll be 4.6. You do it again, it'll be 4.3. You just kind of whittle it down to below 4.2. But since we now have confirmation that we're at 4.0, or what did we say, 4.02 or whatever, still good. We're at 4.02, now we know we need a boil, which I've actually had going here for a while. I know you can't tell, but it's bubbling pretty good. And we need time, 6 minutes, which I think we've beat at this point. So, that's it. Critical limits are met. We know we can bottle this and be safe. Isn't that pretty cool? That's it for tomatoes. Okay, so next up, sanitation. I told you this was going to be so exciting and nerdy. There's a difference between cleaning and sanitation. Cleaning, and this is so funny. If my wife was here right now, she'd say, he's about to talk about cleaning. Really? Okay, so cleaning could be like, you could say, like, oh, I'm going to take this off the shit. I'm just going to, here, I cleaned that off there, right? That could be like, technically, like by the definition of cleaning. You're decluttering or just like wiping things up. Sanitation is a far different thing. Sanitation is actually sanitizing a surface. The way we do that in this process, in the canning process, is with heat. We want to do that with heat. We're not really going to use soap and water. Some people want to wash their jars ahead of time. That's fine. You're not hurting anything by washing your jars. But really, it's going to be boiling water. So we want jars like this in water, which this is the only thing I'm kind of doing not real here that I would be doing at home. I'd have a slightly bigger pot, and this would actually be boiling water here. This is kind of just below boiling, because if I do burn myself, I don't need to go viral. I mean, he's filming. This would be on TikTok like tomorrow. If all of a sudden I'm like, I'd be like the corn kid. I'd be like, it's like, you guys know it's corn. I'd be like, it's warm. I'd be like that guy. Anyway, so we want we want these submerged, and we want them in boiling water. So there's one kind of thing where I'm cheating a little bit in front of you, but not trying to burn myself tonight. The other thing is we want our lids and our rings doing that too. So I'm going to take a bunch of lids, and I'm just going to dump them down in there. I'm also going to take a bunch of rings. I'm going to kind of dump those down in there too. We want those. Typically, again, if it's me at home, I probably have 3 pots going. They're bigger, they're taller. One is boiling tomato, one is boiling water with jars, one is a smaller boiling water with lids and caps and stuff. Tongs are good, but I'm telling you, this is not one of those things people make up. I have witnessed it with my own 2 eyes. I have watched my grandfather pluck things out of boiling water, and I don't even know how he did that. But anyway. Okay, questions, comments, concerns at this point. I'm not doing concerns tonight.
Your tomatoes, before, when you did those, do they have the skins on them?
Skins on, oh my God, I'm so glad you brought that up, yes. They do have the skins on them, super controversial. Guess what else? Seeds. Look at that. You wanna know why I do skins and seeds? The real answer, which I'm embarrassed, the real answer is Grandpa was just a little too cheap. That's the real answer, and that's how he taught me. But then, all of a sudden, started doing a little bit of research. What's in a tomato skin? Why do we get rid of tomato skins? Well, the truth is, the way we actually get rid of them, the way we make our sauce, is we immersion blend. So if I'm bottling at home, I'm actually taking a mixture that looks pretty close to this. I'm putting it in a mason jar, and it's gonna stay just like that. 6 months from now, I'm gonna pop that mason jar out, pop it open, and I wanna make sauce now. So I got my onion, my garlic, right, and everything. Time to put my tomatoes in. Again, they still look like that. Immersion blender. In, smooths it all out. Skins, seeds, all of it. Really good immersion blender is the secret to that. Skip a ton of steps with getting rid of the skins and the seeds. Some people like it, it's part of the process, part of the tradition. We don't get rid of any skins or seeds, even in my, like, the real stuff, like this. Right, you see some seeds in there, right? We get rid of nothing. We want it all. You can Google like tomato skins and why they're good for you and stuff, and there's some actual information out there about that. I don't have any of it memorized, but.
Once you have it to that level of acidity, there's nothing that can change it. Like you can't boil out the acidic?
No, I'm glad you asked that actually. So, so there is something called, it will equilibrate. Again, did I talk about Cornell? It's the longest word I know. It will equilibrate, which means after about 24 hours, it will come to its final resting pH. So, in the best practice, and we would have gotten to this in a few minutes, but you do want to take one jar the next day. Typically, we would probably never jar in jars this small. I usually use 24 ounces or quarts, and CountryMax has them all. They've got the quarts right over there. That's usually what I use is those. But I will always keep a couple of these around because my wife likes candles. But also, I'll always steal one of these and do a little jar. And then the next day, you want it to be at least 24 hours later. You want to test one more time for pH. And you will see it spike a bit. But that's where the buffer comes into play. Because even with a spike, this tomorrow it was at 4.02. My guess, based on doing this for a long time, is that probably will come in at like 4.15 tomorrow. 4.1, 4.2, somewhere in that window. Going up a little bit, but again, that's why you don't want to risk a 4.59 or something like that.
If it did get over the 4.6, what would you do then? Would you go back in and boil it all over again?
Yeah, you could rework it. Sure, yeah.
It's been sitting out for 24 hours?
As long as you got back to your kill step. Our kill step here is heat. So as long as you revisited your kill step, our heat, and our pH again, the next day, in that, worst case scenario, it's the next day, it's bad. As long as you revisited your kill steps, you would be good. Let's talk for a moment about tomatoes. This is where I don't make many friends. Who knows San Marzano tomatoes? You guys know about San Marzano tomatoes? They're good, right? They're good? Only if they're actual San Marzano tomatoes, grown in Italy, in the San Marzano region of Italy, in the volcanic ash soil of Mount Vesuvius, at the exact right altitude with the sun and the exact moisture of the I don't know. San Marzanos are great, but they have to be like real San Marzanos. What you find a lot around here is San Marzano style tomatoes, and those are fine. They're great tomatoes. They're still great tomatoes. Even tomatoes grown here that are San Marzano style tomatoes are great tomatoes. But they are Roma tomatoes. You want to know the main difference between the two? A San Marzano grown in Spencerport versus a Roma grown in Spencerport? The difference is about $5. It's about $5 at the farmer's market. If you call it San Marzano, you get about $5 extra out of it. But they're really good. I'm not crapping on San Marzanos. Even ones grown here are really, really good. But it's like champagne. It's got to be made in the Champagne region of France. Otherwise, it's just sparkling wine. It's the same thing. Sparkling wines are great. Champagne is legit champagne. San Marzanos are legit if they're from the San Marzano region of Italy. Otherwise, they're pretty much just Romas or first cousins of Romas. So does anyone want to throw me out yet after that? That's usually, should we talk about olive oil? Because I also have a controversial olive oil take. Can we do olive oil for a second? So I was talking about sauce. And the way I make my sauce is I start with cheap oil. And a lot of times people will be like, oh, this guy says he's got high-end sauce and he's using cheap oil. Where's the extra virgin olive oil, right? Well, you don't want to use extra virgin olive oil or really good first cold press. That's the good stuff. That's like the olives are fresh out of the field. They press slightly on them. The first stuff that comes out, it's just that slight press with zero heat treatment. That stuff is like a deep yellow, kind of almost greenish. You've ever seen that kind of olive oil? And it's delicious on a salad with bread, all that. Great oil. But you don't want to put it on high heat. It's got a low smoke point because of all the olive particles in it. And so if you try to saute a chicken breast in like extra virgin, first cold press extra virgin olive oil, that oil, you essentially ruin it. Again, back to money, you probably paid like $20 for that bottle of first cold pressed extra virgin olive oil, and now you put it on high heat and you turn it into essentially vegetable oil. You got rid of, it's still usable oil. You'll still saute your chicken breast, it'll be fine. But you might as well have used your cheap oil. So we actually start our sauce with cheap oil, canola oil or soybean oil. Then onion, garlic, red and green bell pepper, then my tomatoes, a couple quarts of tomatoes, immersion blend, basil, parsley, oregano, sugar, salt, black pepper. That's it, that's the whole recipe. Now you never have to buy a jar of sauce. So, but again, back to oil. Using the really, really good expensive oil to just like fry something in a skillet on your stove, save the money. Use the cheap oil for that. The extra virgin olive oil, the first cold press, that's your finishing oil. That goes on at the end. You want to taste that. That's great oil. You're nodding like you're like, yeah. You agree? Yes. Sometimes I get thrown. So I'm not getting thrown out for either one of those takes. So just so we can be clear, the amount of vowels I have in my last name, and I have just tarnished San Marzano tomatoes. I have talked mad smack on extra virgin olive oil, and you guys are still here. I mean, I have. Okay, so this consistency, by the way, is getting really good looking. Getting right about where I want it to be when I'm actually can. If we had done it 10 minutes earlier, no problem. It's fine. If we waited another 10 minutes, no problem. It's fine. You probably want to aim for something in there, though. But with recipes, sometimes people will want me to tell them 90 minutes, 100 minutes, 120 minutes. Eyeball it. When you get to something like that, you wouldn't go wrong if you were earlier or later than this, but this is just fine right here. That'll be perfect. We've got jars, we've got lids, we've got caps, everything in our hot water. This is actually starting to boil a little bit, so this could get ugly up here, but that's all right. So we are sanitizing. These, see how these are sticking up out of the water though? Not ideal. Probably want those fully submerged. We want that entire surface really, really hot. When I actually can at home, I get a whole little setup going. But basically, you want to be really careful because stuff is hot. But we're going to take a jar. Usually get the water out of it. I'm going to take myself usually get myself another nice surface here. I'll get a ring out. I will get one or two of my lids out. See what I was talking about? How they all stick together, and then we rock. And this, to be honest with you guys, is actually probably the easiest part. Is just this part, except for the fact that it's a little dangerous. So we get that. We have a very, very hot liquid. We're actually going to use this hot liquid to sanitize the bottom of this lid and make sure that we have exactly what we're looking for. There we go. That one was for Pete. We get our ring on and our lid on. We do this because we have very hot liquid, and that's going to help the bottom of that lid. That's sanitizing the bottom of that lid.
And it only takes like a couple of seconds?
Just a couple of seconds, yep. And eventually, what are we waiting for? Isn't it cool when you can and you put everything in the other room or you're like off to the side, and then all of a sudden, like, it could be like 10 minutes, it could be like 2 hours, but you'll just start hearing. And I'm always like, ah! I've even got my wife trained to where she's like, ah! Yeah. No, that's shelf stable. Time, temperature, pH. That's shelf stable. There's one thing we're waiting for, and that's that pop. That will be the official seal of like, yes, now we're. If it doesn't pop, then it's not shelf stable. So if it doesn't pop, 24 hours later, yeah. So once in a while you will get something that doesn't pop, and the way that will usually happen in practical use is, you notice I didn't like wipe down the rim or anything. That's what'll happen is you get just a tiny bit of water or tomato juice or something on that rim that's going to prevent that lid from achieving a vacuum. That's what will actually go wrong in real life. You know, if you're going to lose a jar or two, that's probably why it's going to be. So my strategy, I put them all on my kitchen table. Usually do this on like a Saturday afternoon or something. All on my kitchen table. Next day, I'll go through them all to make sure all the buttons are down. If I do come across one or two bad ones, that's what I use to make sauce that day, you know, or I put them right in the fridge or something, use them within a couple of days, because it could happen. It could happen, especially if you get a little sloppy and you start getting stuff everywhere. Yes?
When you store them, do you store them with the rings or without the rings?
I do store them with the rings, but I'm glad you asked that also, because the rings are actually reusable, but the lids are not reusable. And that's a question I get all the time. What is and what is not reusable? Yeah, the rings are reusable, but the lids are not reusable. Oh, yes. Oh, my gosh, you just read my mind. So let's talk about head space. So the official recommendation on head space is 5 to 10% of the jar. If you really want to get super technical with that, just get a ruler, hold it up there, do the math. What's 5%? What's 10%? That will work. I'm going to turn all this off. So 5 to 10% is the official recommendation for how much room you should leave. The less room you leave, the quicker you'll achieve a vacuum. The more room you leave, the less. Stuff will seal if it's a little under 10% or a little over 10%. It'll seal if it's a little under 5%. Where you can run into problems, though, is if you truly leave zero room. You'll either not achieve a vacuum or you'll achieve a really weak vacuum. And that is where things can get a little bit scary, because if you achieve a really, really weak vacuum, it can be enough that you think it's preserved, but it can be not quite enough to actually preserve it. But luckily, nature helps us with that. My grandfather used to say tomatoes talk. What he meant by that is, Has anyone in here ever opened a jar of bad tomatoes? Have you done it? There is no mistaking that they have gone bad. No mistaking. Yeah, you know it. I mean, I've had it happen, I think, maybe once or twice over the years. And of course, in commercial canning, I've seen it happen a handful of times where something has just gone bad. And there is absolutely no accidentally eating that. I mean, it is the type of thing that is so putrid that, like, when you open that and you see it and you do this, because we'll all just naturally go, that will make you sick to your stomach immediately. So if you were able to accidentally consume that, then God bless you. So that should, especially with tomatoes, should make you feel a little bit better. I mean, you're gonna know. If they've gone badly, you will know. It will not. Tomatoes talk.
Botulism, though, you can't smell.
No, there's all kinds of different types of bacteria. So botulism specifically, absolutely, you're right. Can be a silent bad. So pH. This particular thing, like just rotten, who knows exactly what that, there's so many, there's like, again, not a scientist, although I went to Cornell. Not a scientist, but I think there's like thousands of different forms of bacteria and things out there. Yeah, some are detectable, some are not detectable. Yes, ma'am?
How long is that good on the shelf for?
This right here, if I was a professional canner, I would say that's a 2-year shelf life. With those critical limits, the 6-minute 195, pH 4.2, that's a 2-year shelf life all day, for sure. I think that, like, I still have a couple jars. My grandfather passed away in 2015, so I took everything he had in his pantry, and I have 2 of the jars, and I look at them all the time, and they still look good to me. So.
Could you use baking soda to lower the pH?
Oh, I love that. Yes.
Okay.
Cutting acidity. This is like a big thing with like the Italians and how we get the age. You ever heard that? Oh, I get the age. I can't be eating the foot. You know the thing? We've all got like the Uncle Johnny who's like, I get the age. I can't be eating the sauce this late, Dad. I don't know. Okay, I'll have 1 plate, but I've got that uncle. Yes, everyone will say, oh, sugar. Well, sugar cuts the acidity. Sugar does not cut the acidity. Sugar just masks it. Sugar is actually the worst thing in that situation because sugar makes you think it's not acidic, but it actually still is. It's just sweetening it, that's all. Sugar is a fine ingredient. It's very controversial. Some people think great in sauce. I mean, I've been yelled at by a lot of little old men and women who make sauce at home who tell me sugar or not sugar, and they have very strong opinions. I mean, that is a 50-50 battle. But to truly cut acidity, yes, baking soda. Yeah. Out of curiosity, in this room, who likes smooth sauce? And who likes chunky sauce? That was pretty close to 50-50, honestly. In the survey we saw, it was way more skewed towards smooth sauce. Way more. And but in defense, this is a room full of adults who came to a canning class, so you guys are obviously a little more culinarily advanced. Culinarily, I don't know. That was like families, and it had a lot to do with like your kids. So I think a lot of times, I think we can all agree most kids don't like chunky sauce, and so I think that's kind of where that answer gets skewed into the smooth side. So I do think adults, I mean, we saw that was pretty 50-50. With kids, yeah, no chunks, no chunks.
So since you make your jar sauce, so basically like you just did now, it doesn't have that, so when we make our sauce on the weekends, we always use, the paste, the puree already. You don't do the fresh tomatoes.
Yeah.
Is there that big of a difference in your jar sauce as there is from like when you just did it with the cut up tomatoes?
So you're saying between using fresh tomatoes versus if you just buy canned tomatoes?
Or the canned like paste puree?
Yeah. I honestly, I do think there's a big difference, yeah.
What about in your jar sauce?
Like the commercial stuff?
Yeah.
The commercial stuff is a combination of a few different things, and it also depends on which flavor. So we use everything from, we do use some like tomato paste from California. So to be honest with you, it's a really, really nice, rich, red, like ripe tomato paste. We combine with water, turns into puree. We'll add some actual tomato to that then, and it'll have a little more particulate to it, so it'll look like really nice. We've kind of created a way to make a nice puree. As far as home cooking goes, you go to the store, you buy Hunt's, Red Pack, whatever you buy, tomato puree, crushed tomato, diced tomato. I'd combine a few of those to create something, because crushed tomato by definition has like particulates in it. There's like, you can still see just a little, like you can see like some skin in there still, just a tiny bit of it. Puree has got, all that's out of there. It's just pure tomato puree. Diced tomato, obviously diced tomato. If you combine a few of those things, you get a really nice finish. It's just something that I've sort of created, but I never found anything that beats that. Never found anything that just beats a fresh tomato sauce.
So you don't tomato paste in that. You just make sauce.
Just make sauce right from that. If you like thick sauce, there's 2 ways we can get the thick sauce from this. One way, you just said it, we'll add tomato paste. Better way, strain this. If we take this and go a couple of times through a strainer, and we come back, we're gonna start to get to something. Let's see if I can do this. That's gonna look a little bit more like this thickness right up here, right? We can get rid of that water. See that right there? Yeah, that would probably work. But see that? If you get rid of all that water, you do that 2-3 times, you'll just get to where all your canning is that. Then by the time you actually turn that into sauce, it will be much thicker. Yeah, or tomato paste. It's an easy way too. Yeah, you can always thicken with paste and thin out with water. We good? Did we do it? Did we have a canning class? I think we had a canning class. Thank you. Okay. That was oh yeah, thank you. Thanks for coming.